Welcome to a new debate of Duo Discourse.
Today we are undertaking a deep dive into Buddhism.
And this is such a vast topic. We're talking about a tradition that's, what, over 2,500 years old? It's been adapted and reinterpreted all over the world.
It really has. And I think we need to look at it as not just a religion, but as this huge philosophical framework, a system really designed to analyze reality and, well, resolve suffering.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning then. Because
Yeah.
we often think of, Zen meditation or Tibetan rituals, but it started in ancient India. And it didn't exactly emerge to support the system of the time, did it?
Not at all. What's fascinating is that Buddhism arose as a Shramana tradition.
Okay.
That's a wandering ascetic tradition.
A counterculture almost.
Absolutely. Its whole starting position was a rejection of established authority. Specifically, it rejected the absolute authority of the Vedas and the Brahmanical caste system. This was so profound that it was immediately labeled Nastika or heterodox.
So it was revolutionary from day one. And that sets the stage for Siddhartha Gautama, a figure he's almost obscured by myth sometimes. What do we actually know about him historically?
The historical frame we have places him as born into the Shukya clan, which was likely a wealthy, sort of minor aristocratic family.
So not quite the king of a vast empire we sometimes hear about.
Probably not, no. And while traditional dates place him earlier, the modern consensus is that he died later, maybe around 405 BCE. But the core of the narrative, the part that really defines the whole tradition, is that he abandoned a life of comfort. He loved his wife, his son, everything, to find a solution to existential suffering.
And that's the part I always get stuck on. If he was privileged, he had comfort, pleasure, security, why this radical search? If his life was objectively good, what was the problem he was trying to solve with dukkha?
That is the absolute pivot point. The Buddha's great insight wasn't just that, physical pain exists. Everyone gets that. His realization was that dukkha is this pervasive dissatisfaction or stress that's woven into everything, even pleasant moments, because they're impermanent.
So it's the underlying anxiety that nothing lasts.
Exactly. And this stress is caused by a chain reaction that starts with ignorance, a fundamental misunderstanding of how reality actually works.
A cognitive error, then. That's what kicks off the whole cycle.
Yes. That ignorance leads to what's called appropriation. It's the act of pointing to changing things, thoughts, feelings, your body, and identifying them as I and mine. That creates attachments, desire and aversion.
And that desire is the real poison in the system.
It is, especially a specific kind of desire called tasha. This isn't just wanting something, it's an intense obsessive craving. And that is what hooks the mind back into the cycle of repeated existence, or samsara.
So suffering isn't just random bad luck. It's a direct result of misunderstanding reality. What was the framework he developed to actually solve this?
The solution is all contained in his core teaching, the Four Noble Truths. And the best way to think about them isn't as statements of belief. It's much more helpful to see them through, say, a medical lens.
Oh, like a diagnosis and a prescription.
Precisely. They are a fourfold task. The first truth is the diagnosis. Suffering, dukkha, exists. The second is the cause. Suffering comes from craving, tasha.
Okay.
The third is the prognosis. Suffering stops when craving stops. And the fourth is the prescription. The Eightfold Path is the way to make it stop. So you don't just believe them. You have to understand the suffering, abandon the cause, attain the cessation, and then rely on the path.
It's an active process. So if the focus is so internal, on craving, what about the external ethical foundation? For, say, lay people, we hear about the 5 precepts, no killing, stealing, and so on. But how does that work without a divine judge to enforce the rules?
This is where the idea of karma gets a radical makeover. For the Buddha, karma isn't ritual. It's not just an action. Karma is volition. It's the intention, the moral choice behind the action.
So your motivations are what really matter.
They're the primary concern. Actions motivated by greed, aversion, and delusion lead to negative results. Not because a god is punishing you, but because the universe is just structured that way.
So if my intention is good, but the outcome is bad, my karmic slate is better.
It is, yes. The mental action, the volition, is the real generator of the karmic consequence. And this whole system, with no external judge, leads us right to what is probably the biggest philosophical hurdle in Buddhism, the doctrine of non-self, or anatta.
Right. This is the central paradox. If there's no permanent self, no soul, then who or what is being reborn? Who is it that's even following the path to get liberated? Doesn't the whole project need a May to be freed?
This is where we have to bring in the 3 marks of existence: suffering, impermanence, anicca, and non-self, anatta. The argument is pretty deductive.
Okay, lay it out for me.
The Buddha says a true permanent self would have to be unchanging. But when you look at a person, all you find are five aggregates: the skandha form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness, and all those are constantly changing, like a river.
Therefore, no permanent self in charge.
Exactly.
I get the river analogy. It's always new water, but we call it the same river. But this creates a huge problem for cosmic justice. If I'm just a stream of processes and nothing permanent moves from one life to the next, how is karma fair?
This is the challenge. The Buddha's response is the middle path. He says the person in the earlier life and the person in the later life are neither the same nor different.
That sounds incredibly technical,
It's-
almost like a riddle.
It is a bit of a riddle. It's designed to stop you from falling into one of two extremes: either believing in a permanent soul or believing that nothing at all survives death.
So how does it work? Is there an analogy for how this causality functions across lifetimes if there's no soul?
A classic one is lighting one candle from another. The flame on the second candle isn't the same flame as the first, but it is completely dependent on it. It's a causal link, a continuity,
So it's a transfer of energy, not substance.
a transfer of conditioned processes. This is all explained by the concept of dependent arising, or pratityasamutpada. It's the big idea that all things arise in dependence on causes and conditions. Nothing just exists on its own.
And this idea of dependent arising gets pushed even further, right? In Mahayana philosophy, we get the concept of shunyata, or emptiness. What does it mean for everything to be empty?
Right. The Madhyamaka school, founded by Nagarjuna, took this to its peak. Shunyata, or emptiness, means things are empty of intrinsic existence, what they called svabhava.
So it doesn't mean things are illusions or that they don't exist.
Not at all. It means they lack independent, self-sufficient reality. Because everything arises dependently, nothing has a fixed, inherent nature of its own.
Okay, so this is a very abstract idea. How does realizing that reality lacks a fixed essence help someone, deal with their day-to-day life?
It's the ultimate anti-craving tool. If you truly realize that everything, your success, your failures, your very identity is empty of a fixed essence, you can't get excessively attached to it. Nagarjuna famously said that dependent origination is emptiness. Realizing that identity is the true middle path, it stops you from grasping.
This philosophical rigor really brings us back to the Buddha's original attitude. He was a great questioner. The early texts paint him as being very skeptical of anything you couldn't verify for yourself.
He was. He warned against accepting knowledge based only on faith or tradition. He had that famous analogy comparing people who just follow scripture blindly to a file of blind men. The first one doesn't see, the middle one doesn't see, the last one doesn't see. He always pushed for direct experience.
That skeptical, almost scientific stance seems worlds away from how Buddhism is practiced in many places today. How did we get from dependent arising to traditions with elaborate rituals and devotion?
Well, the tradition's adaptability is one of its key strengths. While the early texts were very critical of unobservable beings, later traditions saw devotion as a very practical path. For example, in Pure Land Buddhism, practitioners pray to Buddhas like Amitabha, hoping to be reborn in his Pure Land where enlightenment is easier to achieve.
And then you have something as complex as Vajrayana with deity yoga.
Exactly. Vajrayana uses these incredibly complex visualizations where you imagine yourself as the enlightened deity. It's a method for rapid transformation. And even in China, you had Zen, which is very philosophical, existing right alongside devotional Pure Land practice. They were never really seen as mutually exclusive.
So when we turn to the modern West, we see this movement, secular Buddhism, which tries to strip all of that away. They want the philosophy, but not the rebirth or the deities.
That's right. Secular Buddhists really emphasize the Dharma as a practical, ethical philosophy for this life. They see the Buddha as a historical person, and they're often skeptical of things like rebirth or traditional karma. They want to keep the core insights, especially mindfulness, but leave behind what they see as cultural baggage.
And what's the critique from the traditional side?
The main critique is that this approach cherry-picks the teachings, that it conforms Buddhism to Western modernist ideas of rationality. Critics argue that by removing the challenging metaphysical concepts, like, for instance, Buddha nature, this idea of an inherent, eternal wisdom in everyone, you lose the tradition's depth. You might just reduce it to a form of stress management.
Let's talk about that application then. Mindfulness has just exploded globally. It's used in corporations, in therapy like DBT. It clearly works to promote non-reactivity. But is that bare awareness enough if you detach it from the deeper philosophy?
The success of secular mindfulness is undeniable. It helps people. But if you separate it completely from the ethical framework of karma and the precepts, it can feel incomplete. Traditional practice really stresses pairing mindfulness with introspective awareness.
What does that look like in practice?
There's a great example of a football player, this huge guy, who saw a woman being attacked. As he ran to help, he was mindful of his own size and speed. He consciously moderated himself so he would only frighten the attacker, not the victim.
Ah, so it's not just passive awareness. It's awareness coupled with an active ethical intention.
Exactly, checking your own powerful volitions in real time.
Speaking of ethics, we tend to think of Buddhism as completely pacifist. But is it that simple? Are there any philosophical exceptions to violence?
It's a very complex and contentious point. The core ethics are about cultivating loving kindness, compassion, and so on. But some Mahayana texts do explore extreme dilemmas. For instance, they might suggest that compassionately motivated violence, say, to stop a genocide, could be acceptable if it leads to less suffering overall.
So the intention, the volition, is still primary.
It is. The idea is that an action born of pure, non-hateful compassion might, in a very rare, extreme case, be a net ethical positive. It's a radical idea that shows the tradition grappling with the messy realities of the world.
As we wrap up, it really feels like this entire tradition is defined by its unresolved questions, especially about liberation itself.
Absolutely. The biggest one is what happens to a liberated being after death. It's the problem of nirvana without remainder. And the Buddha famously left this undetermined. He wouldn't say they exist or don't exist. He just described the state as cooled, meaning the fires of craving are out, but said nothing more definitive.
And the debates on ultimate reality are still happening today, even within Mahayana.
For sure. You see it in the debates in Tibetan Buddhism between Rangtong and Shentong, views of emptiness. One school says ultimate reality is empty of itself. The other says ultimate reality Buddha wisdom is not empty, it's eternally existent. They fundamentally disagree, which shows you the intellectual conversation is still very much alive.
So we've gone from a lone ascetic trying to solve existential stress to these incredibly complex metaphysical debates all the way to modern anxiety management.
It seems the core tension is that Buddhism is both a tradition of intense philosophical rigor, and at the same time, it can be one of intense ritual devotion.
And its resilience, its survival across all these cultures, from ancient India to the modern West, isn't because it preserves some fixed dogma. It's because of its capacity to constantly reinvent itself, to spark new dialogues in response to the needs of the moment. That's its real strength. So our final reflection for you, the listener, is this. How does this tradition challenge your own most fundamental assumptions about who you are, what reality is, and what happiness means today? Because the answer to that is always shifting. And that's why this deep dive is never truly finished.